Welcome to lesson 2.6, the distributive property. And mainly we are looking at the distributive property related to real numbers. So the distributive property is following our lesson on multiplication because the distributive property simply involves multiplication. So as we go through that today, keep in mind that the distributive property will be the one that involves multiplication first. So what the distributive property says, the distributive property says if we have A outside of the parentheses and inside the parentheses B plus C. So this would be read as A multiplied by the quantity of B plus C. The distributive property says we can distribute that A to both parts of the inside, giving us A times B plus A times C, or AB plus AC. So in other words, the distributive property tells us we can take what's outside the parentheses and multiply it by each part of the interior. So let's look at a few examples. So example 1 says to distribute, multiply the coefficients and add the exponents. So a coefficient is the number that's in front of a variable. So if there's numbers in front of a variable, like here, 2x, 2 would be the coefficient. Or over here in C, negative 7b, the negative 7 is the coefficient. And then our exponents are our powers. So like here, we'd have x to the first, even though we don't write it. Or like here, this would be a negative 7b to the first and a negative 3b to the first. So when we multiply them, we add 1 and 1 to give us an exponent of 2. So you multiply the coefficients and you add the exponents. So in A, we take 3 times the quantity 2x plus 5. So you multiply the 3 by 2x, giving us 6x. Keep the addition sign in the middle. And then 3 times 5 is 15. So this becomes 6x plus 15. In B, we're distributing the negative 6. So a negative 6 times x gives us a negative 6x. The negative 6 times 4 gives us a negative 24. So we could write this as a negative 6x minus 24. In C, the negative 3b is after the parentheses, but that's still what's being distributed, even though it's in its own parentheses. That's just to separate the negative sign and multiplication, so it didn't read as minus 3b. So in this case, we have the quantity negative 7b minus 2, and then we're distributing the negative 3b to each part. So a negative 3b times a negative 7b. Negative 3 times negative 7 is 21, and then b times b is b squared. So that first part is 21b squared, and then a negative 3b multiplied by a negative 2. So a negative 3b times a negative 2 gives us a positive 6b. So we'd have 21b squared plus 6b. In D, we're distributing the 8 to 5/8 x minus 3/4. So we'll multiply 8 by each part. 8 times 5/8 simply gives us, because the 8's cancel top and bottom, leaves us with 5x. 8 times 3/4, 8 divided by the 4 on bottom is 2, times the 3 on top is 6. So we end up with 5x minus 6. In E, we're distributing a negative 5x to the quantity x plus 6. So a negative 5x times x is a negative 5x to the second power. And then a negative 5x times 6 would give us a minus 30, and there should be an x attached to that. So that should be a minus 30x. because the negative 5x times positive 6 is a minus 30. So negative 5x squared minus 30, and we still need to attach that x. And then in F, we have 1/4 y times the quantity 8y minus 20. So 1/4 y times 8y, 8 times 1/4 is 2, y times y is y squared. So we have 2y squared. 1/4 y times a negative 20, because the minus 20 is the same as a negative 20, gives us a minus 5y. So we have 2y squared minus 5y. So again, the distributive property is as simple as you're multiplying what's outside the parentheses by each part of the inside. So then we have example 2. Asks us to combine like terms, which means you add the coefficients and you leave the exponents alone. So in order to be like terms, the term has to have the same exponent value and the same variable. So if I have a negative 5x to the first and a 2x to the first, I can combine them by adding a negative 5 and the 2. So that would simply give me a negative 3x, because we leave the exponents alone, so it's just to the first. In B, I can combine the negative 10y and the negative 8y. So a negative 10y and a negative 8y have the same variable and power, so we can combine them. Negative 10 and negative 8 gives me a negative 18y, and then we just bring down the plus 4. In C, combining our like terms, the 9a squared minus 5a squared can be combined because they both share the a squared. So 9 minus 5 gives me 4a squared. And then the minus 3a can't be combined with the a squareds because it has a different exponent. So then it would be 4a squared, and we just bring down the minus 3a. So 4a squared minus 3a. And then in D, we have 7/8 x plus a negative 3/4 x. So I need a common denominator if I'm adding or subtracting fractions. Both 4 and 8 go into 8, so the 7/8 x stays the same. And the negative 3/4 x is a negative 6/8 x. Because to get to 8, 4 times 2 on the bottom, we do the same on the top. So then we have 7/8 x minus 6/8 x, which simply leaves us with 1/8 x. Then our last examples, parts A, B, C, D, and E of example 3, asks us to simplify. So when we simplify, we distribute first, and then we combine like terms. So the first thing you want to do is use the distributive property and then combine your like terms. And that is the process for simplifying. So in A, we have a negative 2 multiplied by the quantity 3a minus 5, then plus a 2a. So first I'm going to distribute the negative 2 inside the parentheses. So negative 2 times 3a, negative 6a, negative 2 times a negative 5, plus 10. So then we bring down the plus 2a. So we have a negative 6a plus 10 plus 2a. We can combine the negative 6a and 2a to give us a negative 4a plus 10. Can't simplify any further because we're out of like terms. In B, we need to distribute the 2x to the x plus 4 first. So 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 4 is plus 8x, or a positive 8x. Then we bring down the minus 5x squared. Combine the 2x squared with the negative 5x squared, giving us a negative 3, because the negative 5 and 2, negative 3x squared. And then we simply bring down the plus 8x, and that's as far as we can go, no more like terms. And then in C, we have 5 minus 2 times the quantity a plus 8. So really what I'm distributing here is a negative 2. So a negative 2 times a is a negative 2a. And negative 2 times 8 is a negative 16. So we'd have 5 minus 2a minus 16. We can combine the 5 and the negative 16 to give us a negative 11. So we'd have a negative 2a minus 11. And then our last two examples. In D, we have a negative y to the third, or a negative y cubed, minus 6y times the quantity y squared minus y. So we're distributing the negative 6y. So a negative 6y times y squared is a negative 6y to the third. And then a negative 6y times a negative y is a positive 6y squared. So a negative y to the third minus 6y to the third plus 6y squared. We can combine our y to the thirds. Negative 1 and negative 6 gives us a negative 7y to the third plus 6y squared. And then the final example for this lesson, we have 4n plus 3n times the quantity 2n minus 7, and then minus a 5n squared. So I'm distributing the 3n to the 2n and the negative 7. So 3n times 2n is 6n squared. 3n times a negative 7 is a negative 21n. So bring down what we didn't use, and we have 4n plus 6n squared minus 21n minus 5n squared. So I can combine my positive 6n squared and my negative 5n squared to give me a positive 1n squared. And then we have a positive 4n and a negative 21n. Negative 21 plus 4, it gives us a negative 17n. So we'd have n squared minus 17n. So the key to this whole lesson comes back to using and understanding the distributive property, where you multiply what's outside the parentheses by each part of the inside.